Hello everyone. Today we are going to go through the final part of this novel and deliberate the definition that we have perceived from the book. Mrs. Brown drives along the freeway after dropping her son Richie with Mrs. Hatch, the babysitter. That afternoon, she tried to put Richie down for a nap and tried to read her favorite book, yet distracted with her thoughts on Richie, the imperfect cake, and the kiss with Kitty. She felt as if she might be going insane with her life and asserted to be away for 2 hours. But before she went, she had to perform her domestic obligation as a housewife, preparing eateries for the evening dinner. She also made a second cake as she was not satisfied with her first attempt, such that she truly wants to do something magnificent respecting her husband's birthday. Laura feels baffled about whether she really feels for Kitty herself or just desires to perceive her dynamic personality. Laura suddenly thinks of the kiss and wonders if she and Kitty would kiss again later, then thinks about her criticism over the cake. She thinks too much about the imperfection of her cake and that she neglected the purpose of the birthday, overlooking Arthur's appreciation as she did it with her heart and her great dedication, specialized for her husband. In the next scene, Laura went away trying to find some place silent for her to enjoy the novel alone, since she wants privacy to subdue her discontentment. A public park or a cafe is not a suitable place for her to put down her unsteady mind. So she decided to rent a room at the hotel named Normandy in the city of Los Angeles. At the counter, she lied to the receptionist, a nonsense lie, I presume, that her husband is late and will join her later. Her suffering feels lighter to deal with in private, as if this place made her feel relief. She enters room number 19 and drastically portrays her dark double, a twin that yet feels satisfied by resting quietly in her insulated space. She glances around the turquoise walls before lying down on the bed, feeling relief and reading Mrs. Dalloway. As she reads through a section about immortality of life, Laura starts to think about suicide and imagine how easy it is to let her soul be freed from this chaotic realm. She thinks that she may have the capacity to kill herself and understands why people choose to kill themselves in places such as hotel rooms. The notion of giving up on constantly adjusting to her life seems like a comforting and beautiful prospect. Laura quickly realized she could never go through with it because of Dan, Richie, and her unborn child. But she welcomes her thought that she could take her own life if she wanted. Mrs. Wolf sits with Vanessa in the kitchen drinking tea. Vanessa talks about a coat that she wanted to buy for her daughter, Angelica, at Harrods. Whilst listening to Vanessa's talks, Virginia has a deliberation inside her mind about her character, Clarissa. Clarissa would not even think about self-slaughter, as she won't be able to bear the thought of leaving life. Clarissa is too fascinated with details of one's life. Rather, someone else will commit suicide. Someone miserable, experienced, and a genius, capable of interpreting life as painful, to want to leave behind tiny things in life, such as coats and cups of tea. According to her thought, it is the origin of the shell-shocked character Septimus, and somewhat reflected her own suicide. Thus, she is alive in a contemporary world, inside a lively book that bring her back to life. Nellie came back from London with the tea and sugared ginger. While Nellie is busy at the counter, Virginia leans toward Vanessa and kisses her on the lips.
In this scene, Julia sighs about poor Louise, but Clarissa thinks at that moment that she wants to be Louise, the strange person immorally loose on the streets. She wonders if Louise and Walter Hardy will ruin her party, and she questions the wisdom of having invited them. Clarissa feels a rush of love for her daughter, and she hugs Julia. Clarissa is sure her party will be a failure. Richard will be bored. She chides herself for being so slight, to care so much about a silly party. Julia tells Clarissa that she is going to shopping with Marie Crew, who's waiting outside and smoking a cigarette. Clarissa tells Julia to invite Mary in, but Julia clearly doesn't want to. Mary is too outrageous for Clarissa's conventional sensibilities, but Julia acquired that she goes to get Mary because she wants Mary and her mother to get to know each other. Julia thinks Clarissa is afraid of Mary, and Clarissa covers this truth by moving the waist an inch to the left. She really doesn't want to deal with Mary Crew. When Mary enters an apartment, Clarissa is reminded of an endlessly hungry dog that will just keep eating and eating. The two women exchange a few trivial words of greeting. Mary announces that she hates to shop, but is accompanying Julia anyway. Mary says she'd rather confront a line of riot police than go shopping. Mary is a radical who despises consumerism, who hates merchandise and the American penchant to buy. When Clarissa offhandedly tells Mary to take good care of Julia, Mary curses Clarissa in her thoughts. Then Mary decides that it's not Clarissa's fault. She is the way she is. It's society's fault. And Clarissa is only saying that she's doing what she expects of her. Clarissa thinks that Mary is a fraud, a woman who just wants to attract attention by making a splash. Clarissa's dislike of Mary morphs into self-criticism when she labels herself in trivial, someone who thinks too much about parties. Clarissa also wonders why her straight daughter is so friendly with a lesbian who clearly desires her. Clarissa feels a moment of intense love for Julia. Then the two young women leave. Vanessa and her children have left. Virginia looks at her novel in progress. She has high hopes for its success, but fears it will prove weak and devoid of true feelings. The love and contentment she felt just a few hours ago have completely vanished. She tries to convince herself that her current life is enough, a reason for her to be content. Virginia tenses when she feels a headache coming on. Then she decides it's not the headache, but itself a memory of the headache. Her fear of headache. She'll be alright, she's herself, and detects no voice or hallucinations. Virginia decides to go for a walk, and she quietly slips out the back door in the garden. She feels as if she's entered the realm of the dead bird. She thinks it's not entirely disagreeable. This cemetery feelings, in some way, the grave is more bearable than the beef and the lambs. She nears the body of the bird and gazes at it. It's no longer beautiful, and Virginia knows that the next day Leonard will scoop it up and throw it out. She thinks it's trash, that's all. The living begin is an illusion. Virginia walks towards town. She passes a pair of lovers on the street, which makes her think, I am alone. As she walks, she feels the nearness of her insanity and knows that if it strikes again, she'll be utterly alone. A realm of the living dead. She must keep walking to avoid the devil that is her illness. In town, Virginia goes to the train station. She'll buy a ticket to go to London. If she disappears into the great city, she'll be alright. Alas, she's just missed that London train, but she buys ticket for the next one that leaves in 25 minutes. She'll have a few hours in London and catch the last train back to Richmond. She knows that Leonard will be worried and angry, but she doesn't care. Life in Richmond is a type of death for Virginia. It's better, she thinks, to face the worst in the bustle and stimulation of great city. She sits on a bench to wait for the train but becomes restless and walks around outside the station. She sees Leonard approaching and thinks she must escape from him. But she walks toward him and sees he is clearly upset. Virginia lies to him, saying she's just out for a walk. She says nothing about the train to London. Leonard admits he was extremely worried about her. Leonard guides her back to the house where dinner is waiting. She's desperate for the freedom of London, but let Leonard take her home. Virginia thinks of her character, Miss Dalloway, whose party is about to begin, but who longs for the fear of the city of death beyond her house. Virginia tells Leonard, it's time for us to move back to London. He is uncertain, but she assures him she is no longer ill. She tells him how she longs to live in London again. As they walk back to the house, like any middle-aged couple going home, Virginia knows that she'll never tell Leonard about the train ticket in her pocket. Sally, Oliver, St. Ives, and Walter Hardy are finishing lunch. Both Oliver and Walter urge Sally to be a part of the movie, a thriller with a gay hero. Sally is unsure. She says she has to think about it. Sally leaves with Walter and reminds him to be at the party that evening. While they're talking, Walter sees some beautiful shirt in the store window and decides to buy one for his lover Evan, who has AIDS but is surviving on the latest drug treatments. Sally becomes annoyed, then angry. When she realizes she never know what to buy for Clarissa, she decides she must leave and say goodbye to Walter. As she goes home, Sally is one to buy a gift for Clarissa, or to go home and say something beyond passion itself, something truly intimate and deeply meaningful. She thinks of how devastated she'd be if Clarissa died, but she recognized that this love of theirs, with its reassuring domesticity, has yoked Sally directly to the machinery of mortality itself. She goes to a flower shop, frowns at the usual display, and thinks she'll buy nothing. Then her eye catches a sight of bunch of yellow roses and she buys them. Back at the apartment, Sally can tell that something is wrong. Clarissa sounds upset. Sally wonders what she has done to upset Clarissa. Clarissa is sitting on a sofa looking disoriented and stricken. Basically, Louis' visit and his weeping. Her encounter with Mary Crew has also left her agitated. When Sally noticed that Clarissa had also bought yellow roses, they both laugh, which eases the tension somewhat. In fact, they both begin to feel simply happy and loving towards each other.
During the way to Mr. Slatch's house, she was only thinking of the book she read, Clarissa and Insane Septimus, the flowers, the party. Image went through her mind. The figure in the car, the airplane with the message. She was herself but not herself. She was a woman in London, an aristocrat, pale and charming, a little false. She was Virginia Woolf, and she was this other innocent, tumbling thing known mother as mother, driver and swirling streak of pure life like the Milky Way, a friend of Kitty. And as soon as she arrives at Mrs. Slatch's house, she gets out of the car and stands for a moment. She was overtaken by the sensation of unbeing as she thinks she is no one and nothing. She also thought that by going to the hotel she had slipped out of her life and been thinking of lonely death. If she has gone to a hotel, it might be the way for her to meet her lover. Her breathing was suddenly labored. She was slightly dizzy, as she might collapse. But she forced herself to pick up her son Richie and have a birthday party for her husband Dan. It was hard for her to explain her feelings about the book. As soon as Richie saw his mother, he was flushed and alarmed, but also overwhelmed by love and relief, as there was the feeling that Laura caught him. But she just had the guilty conscience and thinks that he is just confused. Richie breaks into tears and runs towards her. "Oh, now," Laura says, and she holds him with a feeling that is undefinable that makes her feel better. During the way back home, Richie watched his mom as Laura stopped at the stop sign. She said, "It's a good thing Daddy worked as late as he does. We'll put it all together in time, don't you think so?" And she looks at him and sees his eyes, his face, which appears for the first time as he was suffering. And it was an emotion that was unable for her to recognize. "Honey," she said, "what is it?" He said, "Mommy, I love you," which was louder than necessary, but there was something odd in his voice. He sounded frantic. Laura answered, "I love you too, baby," even though she said the word 1,000 times, but she could feel the nervousness in her throat, and she had to make the effort to sound natural. It seemed like Richie would cry again very soon, but his eyes were bright and unblinking. He continues to stare at him, and it seems like he knows that she has been somewhere illegal. He can tell that she was lying and continues to stare at her. Laura said, "Don't worry, honey, everything's fine. We're going to have a wonderful party for Daddy's birthday tonight." Richie will always know when something is wrong because to him his mother is everything. Mrs. Dalloway came to help Richard to get ready for the party, and she knocked on the door, but no one responded, and she knocked again. The apartment was full of light, all shades were raised, the window open. The air in the apartment was filled with ordinary days on Sunday afternoon. In Richard's room, there were silent explosions, his cardboard boxes, his bathtub, which was filthier than she realized. "Richard," Clarissa calls. "Mrs. Dalloway. Oh, Mrs. Dalloway, it's you." She rushes into the other room and finds Richard still in his robe, perched on the sill of the open window, straddling it with one skinny leg, still in the apartment, and the other still invisible to her, dangling out over 5 stories. "Richard," she says sternly, "get down from there." "It's lovely out," he says. "What a day." He looked insane, shitless astride the window like some scarecrow equestrian, a park statue by Giacometti. His hair was plastered to his scalp in some places, jutting out at sharp, rakish angles in others. His inside leg, bare to mid-thigh, blue-white, is skeletal, but with a surprising solid, little fist of calf muscle still clinging stubbornly to the bone. "You're terrifying me," said Clarissa. "I want you to stop this and come inside. Now." He does not listen to Clarissa and still staying up there. "Darling, please put your leg back down on the floor. Will you do that for me?" said Clarissa. "I don't think I can make it to the party. I'm sorry," said Richard. And Clarissa was able to remain calm in a difficult situation, which was surprising for her. At the same time, he feels like there is something that has already happened. It feels like memory, something within her, something like a voice but not a voice, an inner knowledge, all but indistinguishable from the pump of her heart, says, "Once I found Richard sitting on a window ledge 5 stories above the ground." "Get down from there, please," said Clarissa. And Richard's face darkened and contracted as Clarissa caused him such a difficult question. Richard nods and does not move and says, "I don't know if I can face this, the party and the ceremony and then the hour after that and the hour after that." Clarissa said, "You don't have to go to the party, you don't have to go to the ceremony, you don't have to do anything at all." And Clarissa asked Richard to tell her a story about the most ordinary thing from his day, and he starts telling the story. Richard tells Mrs. Dalloway, "I'm afraid I can't make to the party." Mrs. Dalloway says, Please don't worry about the party. Don't think about the party. Give me your hand." "You've been so good to me," said Mrs. Dalloway. "Richard, I love you. Does that sound right?" "No," Richard smiles. He shakes his head. And he said, "I don't think 2 people could have been happier than we've been." Clarissa screams, "No!" Richard seems so certain that she briefly imagines as it hasn't happened at all, and she reaches the window in time to see Richard still in flight, his robe billowing, and it seems even now as if it might be a minor accident, something reparable. She continues to watch him and see he lies where he fell, face down, the rope thrown up over his head and his bare legs exposed, white against the dark concrete, and she runs from the room and thinking of calling for help, but she doesn't. As she runs down the stairs and knows that she will be ashamed later as a woman running down a set of stairs uninjured, still alive. She suffers from confusion for a moment over how to get to the air shaft where Richard lies, and she briefly feels as she's gone to hell. She remained kneeling at his side, being uncertain about what to do next. She tells herself that she should go call the police, but she doesn't want to leave Richard alone, so she waits for someone to call down to her. She would like to speak to him but wasn't able to, so she simply rests her head lightly against his back. If she were able to say something, she would talk about how Clarissa loved Richard in return, loved him enormously, but left him on a street corner over 30 years. She would confess to her desire over a relatively ordinary life and how much she wanted to come to her party and exhibit her devotion in front of her guests. She would ask for his forgiveness for shying away on what would prove to be the day of his death, from kissing him on his lips and telling herself she did only for the sake of his health. They were having Dan's birthday party. The candles are lit. The song is sung. "Happy birthday, darling," says Laura. Laura is trapped here forever, posing as a wife. She must get through this night and then tomorrow morning and then the other night here in this room, with nowhere else to go. It might be like walking into a field of brilliant snow. It could be dreadful and wonderful at the same time. We thought her sorrow were ordinary sorrows. We had no idea. Laura asked Richie, "Did you make a wish too?" He nods. It seems like he was always making a wish, every moment, and that he wishes, like his father, have mainly to do with continuance. Dad asked Richie, "How would you like to help me cut the cake?" "Yes," Richie answered. Laura bring dessert plates and forks from the kitchen. Here she is, in the modest dining room, safe with her husband and child, as Kitty lies in a hospital room waiting to hear what the doctor have found. Kitty seems like she will be healed by medical science, and if she's past help, Dan and Laura and their son, the promise of the second child, will all still be there. In this room, where our little boy frowns in concentration over the job of removing the candles, and his father hold one up to his mouth and exhort him to lick off the frosting. Laura reads the moment as it passes. She smiles at her son from a distance.
The story turned back to Mr. Wolf. Leonard and Virginia have decided to move back to London. Virginia anticipates engaging in the cultural life of the city. She looks forward both to the stimulation of her artist friends and having time to write her own novels. Virginia remembers kissing Vanessa and thinks the kiss was quite innocent. Yet, she can feel that it conveys a deep and strong life force, complex and full of love. The meaning of the kiss is as mysterious as life itself, Virginia thinks. It can be explained that the remembered kiss with Vanessa mirrors the long ago kiss Clarissa, with help from Richard, in that both the giving and withholding have enormous significance and consequences. Virginia's kissing Vanessa represent an intense love and mysterious life force beyond understanding but full of profound, transcendent meaning. Carissa now knows that her former Daniel of a kiss has robbed her of this profound love, which would have been the love of her life that she never have. Virginia designs that her character, Mrs. Dalloway, would have had a female lover in her youth, and that the lovers would have shared just one kiss. The kiss will express the most intense love Mrs. Dalloway will ever experience. Virginia is excited by this idea. She gets up to leave the room and promise Leonard that she will be in bed by 11 p.m. Virginia envisioned Mrs. Dalloway as mourning the loss of the great potential love. But Virginia will not have Mrs. Dalloway kill herself, because she will be too much in love with life, with London. Instead, Virginia will create a character, someone who is a cleanly intuitive and transcendent genius. A deranged poet or artist, who will be the character in the novel To Die. The story turns back to Mrs. Brown. Lola is brushing her teeth, getting ready for bed. She knows that Dan will probably want sex tonight. Lola finishes brushing teeth and looks in the mirror. She imagines some sort of ghost self standing behind her and watching her. She shrugs off the feelings. As she puts away the toothpaste, she noticed the bottle of sleeping pills in the medicine cabinet. Laura remembers that she can't use them while she is pregnant. Laura looks at the pill in the bottle. She thinks, it will be as simple as checking into a hotel room. She gladdened by how wonderful it would be, to no longer matter, to no longer struggle or fail. Then she wonders if she could force herself to feel that evening's dinner was perfect enough. Could she then decide to want no more? Suicide is clearly on Laura's mind as she contemplates the sleeping pills. They remind her of how easy it would be to end the suffering of life. She clearly feels, at heart, it's not worth living. Perhaps it's ironic that remembering her pregnancy causes Laura to replace the pill in the cabinet. It's likely that her relationship with the fetus inside her is akin to her emotionally distant and unnatural relationship with Rishi. In any case, it seems as if Lola succumbs to self-deceptions, trying to go through the motions and pretend to care about things she is physically and emotionally alienated from. After that, Lola goes into the bedroom and asks Dan if he had a nice birthday, which he says he did. As Dan pulls the sheet back so she can get into the bed with him, Lola can't seem to feel her body. She feels totally disembodied, like a ghost. Then she finally gets into the bed beside her husband. We can tell that she is a ghost of herself, an insubstantial being who watches her ordinary self act out her performance as a perfect wife and housewife. Lola's body is numb when she gets into the bed with her husband. Her desire to escape her life is made clear by this disembodied state. The ending part is about Mrs. Dalloway. It's past midnight and Laura Brown is in Carissa's apartment. It is about 50 years after the events in the Mrs. Brown chapters occur. Laura is about 80 years old. Julia is asleep on the sofa, but wakes when Carissa, Sally, and Laura come in. Julia tells Carissa that she's called everyone on the list to tell them that the party is cancelled. Laura Brown sits on the sofa and accepts Julia's offer of a cup of tea. Carissa sits with Mrs. Brown, thinking about aging and copying. When Sally asks if it would be out for place to eat the food made for the party, Carissa answers, "I think Richard would be probably have appreciated that." Carissa tells Rolla that she can go to bed in the guest room whenever she feels tired. But Mrs. Brown is not ready to sleep yet. Carissa sits with Lola, the mother who walks away from her life with her son and her family, and went to live in Canada. Carissa shies herself from making a tired comment about Richard being a wonderful man. But Rolla then states that he was a wonderful writer. Rolla has read all his poetry and his novel. Carissa has the sudden realization that it was Rolla, Richard's mother, who is the ghost and the goddess contained in Richard's poetry. Carissa understands that it was not she who was his poetic muse. Carissa knows Rolla has been worshipped and despised, has obsessed Richard, the poetic genius. Carissa feels as if she's suffocating. She wants to ask Rolla important questions about Richard, but somehow cannot. When Carissa says she did her best in caring for Richard, Rolla says, "I wish I could have done better." Carissa contemplates Rolla, the woman who left her family and is now its only surviving member. Carissa wonders what Richard experienced as he fell from the window to his death. Was suicide a pleasure for him? Did he feel pain at his skull smash onto the pavement? She stopped this thought by going into the kitchen to see about the food. Their amount of it's enough for the 50 people invited in the party. When the woman remarked that it's time for this day to be over, it seems to Carissa that at that moment Richard truly begins to leave the world. Carissa muses about ordinary life, about its changeability from fleeting joy to longer-lasting darkness, from active wakefulness to descent into sleep. Choose wonder. Heaven only knows why we love it so. Carissa thinks that here is her party for the 4 women who have survived Richard's death and have the great good fortune to be alive. Rolla goes back into the living room and sees Rolla herself as the woman of wrath and sorrow, in love with death, who hunted Richard's work. Rolla, a Liberian from Toronto, it's Richard's beloved and treasure. We can see that flowers have dual symbolism in this chapter. The women have gathered in Carissa's apartment to mourn the death of a loved one, so the surrounding flowers are connected to death. As the chapter ends, however, Carissa reflects on the good fortune of being alive, and the profusions of flowers connect to the life-embracing spirits as well.